The sun on Virelin burned red through the smoke-choked skies. It cast long shadows across the cratered jungle, filtering through charred tree husks and the twisted remnants of fallen dropships. The war here wasn't supposed to last this long. The Galactic Alliance had declared it a simple sweep: eliminate insurgents, establish forward command, secure resources. But 2 months in, and the simple sweep had become a brutal grind. The aliens were still laughing. In the makeshift command post, little more than a series of reinforced pods stacked on jungle mud, Lieutenant Vexor of the Xanax clicked his mandibles in amusement. His 4 arms gestured animatedly as he mimicked a slow, limping gait. He walks like his joints are made of rusted servos, Vexor sneered. Tell me, is that a human combat posture or their mating dance? Laughter erupted among the squad. Saurian, Kolati, Trillin, all veterans of campaigns across half the galaxy, joined in. The object of their ridicule, Sergeant Major Elias Brandt, remained silent, seated against a battered crate with a battered rifle across his lap. He didn't look like much. 68 Terran years, leathery skin, silver stubble across a jaw that looked carved from granite. His armor was outdated, his scope analog. His eyes, though, pale blue and steady, watched the room without blinking. Why's he even here? Muttered Trellix, the Kolati communications officer. Human command dumped their old ones on us now. He's here because he volunteered, came a quieter voice, Lieutenant Mora from the human contingent, the only one who hadn't joined in the mockery. She was young, green, but smart enough to watch Elias with the same wariness one reserves for dormant predators. Brandt didn't speak. He didn't need to. The jungle beyond the walls whispered louder than any of them. Distant pulses of plasma fire cracked through the air like the slow beat of war drums. The insurgents had struck again, another ambush. 3rd one this week. They came at night, from the trees, with tactics so primitive the alien commanders barely had vocabulary to describe them. But they worked. Vexor dismissed the latest report with a scoff. They strike and vanish. Weak prey using cowards' tactics. We'll burn the forest and be done with it. Elias finally stirred, shifting the rifle across his knees, slow as glacial drift. Burn the forest, he said, voice low but firm, and you won't see them coming next time. Not until they are chewing through your squad's bones. The laughter faded. Vexor turned toward him, offended more by the interruption than the warning. You presume to lecture us on warfare, Relic. Brandt stood, spine cracking audibly. He was only a few inches taller than the Xanax, but he seemed to grow a foot in the space between breaths. He walked toward the central table, boots echoing against the metal floor. I've fought jungle wars on 3 continents, he said. Real ones. With monsters that didn't use plasma rifles. They used teeth. Darkness. Terrain. You think you're predators. His eyes swept the room. But humans have always hunted predators. Vexor opened his mandibles to retort, but the command screen behind them blinked to life with a shriek of static. A live feed, drone footage from the team dispatched into Sector 17. The squad was under attack. Motion blurs flickered between trees. Muzzle flashes stuttered, then vanished. One by one, biometric signals flatlined. The room went still. That's our best scout unit, Vexor said quietly. 30 seconds. Gun. Nobody laughed now. I'll go, said Brandt. The silence deepened. Mora stepped forward. Sergeant. I've seen this kind of fight before, he cut her off. You don't chase ghosts in the jungle. You stalk them back. You learn their pattern. And then you break it. Vexor hissed. You'll die out there. Maybe, Elias replied, picking up his old rifle. But I've already outlived your best unit. He paused at the hatch, looked back over his shoulder. You're predators, he said again. But he tapped 2 fingers to his chest, just above the heart, way apex. Then he was gone, swallowed by the red mist of Virelin's dying light, leaving only silence and the faint click of the command screen, still blinking out names that no longer answered. And for the first time since landing, the soldiers stopped laughing. The jungle swallowed him. Elias moved like vapor through the undergrowth, every step deliberate, every breath measured. He didn't rely on motion sensors or AI mapping, just instinct, memory, and the peculiar quiet that preceded a kill. The aliens behind him depended on satellites and thermal scans. He depended on decades of surviving places technology failed. The insurgents weren't just soldiers, they were locals, bred in the roots of this planet. They knew the terrain, knew the rhythms of the wild. They didn't fight for territory. They fought for home. That made them dangerous. That made them familiar. He remembered the deep jungles of Venezuela, 40 years ago. The blood-soaked leaves. The silence that came after an ambush. The smell of rot and gunpowder. War never changed. Only the language of it did. Ahead, a clearing opened like a wound in the forest. He knelt at the edge, raised his battered scope. A figure darted through, too quick for alien scanners, but not for him. Elias adjusted his breath. The world slowed. One shot. Clean. The body dropped like a puppet with cut strings. He didn't move for 12 minutes. When he did, it was to reposition. Across the next 3 hours, he dismantled the insurgents' forward cell, one shot at a time. No missed rounds. No wasted movement. When they circled, he was gone. When they laid traps, he had already laid better ones. Blood soaked the moss in quiet patterns. Back at base, they watched. The command post had grown tense. Mora stared at the flickering feed from a Recon drone. Every time they zoomed in on the sniper's position, he wasn't there, only the aftermath. A downed enemy. A trap sprung. Heat signatures gone cold. Is he hunting them? Asked Trellix, voice just above a whisper. No, Mora replied. He's breaking them. Even Vexa had grown still. The earlier arrogance had drained from his posture, replaced by something unfamiliar, confusion. His kind respected strength. But this wasn't brute force. It was something worse. Something surgical. His one man, Vexa muttered. This is illogical. It's human, Mora said. Deep in the jungle, Elias moved again. His hands brushed the trees, feeling vibrations long before sound reached him. He'd noticed something odd, patterns in how the insurgents placed their shooters. There was structure here. Command. That meant someone was orchestrating the attacks. He adjusted his course. Night fell like a curtain. The aliens feared the Virellan night. Its predators hunted by echolocation and smell. Technology failed. Scanners blurred. The jungle became alive with noise, most of it dangerous. But Elias thrived. He painted his face with soot and plant oil. His rifle barely gleamed. Every inch of his presence disappeared into shadow. He moved with the certainty of someone who had done this in more than one world. There was no fear, just purpose. He found the enemy's secondary camp nestled beneath the roots of a massive canopy crawler, a species of tree older than human civilization. 4 guards. Light security. That was the mistake. They thought they were invisible. Elias circled, marking angles, wind, lines of sight. He whispered to the dark, 4 isn't enough. The first 2 guards never even screamed. The third tripped a trap wired with bone needles and neurotoxin. The last turned to run and met Elias's eyes. There was no sound. Just a single flash. Inside the camp, he moved quickly. Maps. Communications gear. Tribal markings. He photographed everything, uploaded nothing. He knew satellites could be compromised. Trust was a luxury he hadn't packed. Then he found the leader, wounded, limping, eyes wide with disbelief. Elias didn't raise his weapon. Who taught you tactics? He asked. The insurgent bared teeth. You're alone. Elias nodded. And you're dying. I don't fear death. I'm not here to teach you fear, Elias said quietly. I'm here to teach you why you lost. He left the man alive, bleeding, breath shallow, enough to send a message. By dawn, he was back at the edge of the jungle. Not returning. Just watching. The base shimmered in the heat, still intact. The aliens hadn't ventured out. Not since the drone feed started showing red excess. He tapped his com once. Mora's voice crackled through. Report. Neutralized 14. Located enemy command node. Disrupted chain. Left a gift. There was a pause. We were going to send reinforcements. Don't, Elias said. They'd just slow me down. He watched a vulture beast descend on the trail behind him. The jungle was cleaning itself. He waited another few minutes before moving. He was tracking something bigger now. A shape he'd glimpsed in the patterns. This wasn't about territory. It was about hunting. On both sides. He whispered to the trees, "Let's see who the real predator is." And then he vanished into the green, leaving silence and stories in his wake. The storm broke just before dusk. Rain fell in sheets over the jungle, turning ash into mud and blood into dark streaks beneath the canopy. From the ridge above the base, Elias knelt beneath a cloak of camouflage netting, eyes fixed through his scope on the tree line beyond. The enemy was gathering. He could see the way the brush shifted, just wrong enough to betray motion. They were preparing for a final push. Behind him, the alien outpost stirred with frantic energy. Alarms blared, voices barked commands in a dozen tongues, and automated turrets whirred in uncertain arcs. But fear hung in the air thicker than the smoke. They weren't ready. He knew that. They all did. Elias adjusted the windage on his scope, compensating for the sudden gusts. His fingers moved slowly, methodically, like a man winding an old clock. There was no panic in him. Just quiet. Mora's voice crackled over the comms. Satellite confirms heat signatures, at least 60. Coming in fast. Numbers won't matter, Elias replied. A pause. I'm sending a squad up to reinforce you. No, he said. Keep them at the perimeter. You'll need everybody down there when this starts. But you're alone. He let that hang. Then, finally, not for the first time. The first shot came at twilight. A sniper in the tree line, cleverly hidden, perfectly still. Elias saw the shimmer a heartbeat before the plasma bolt discharged. He exhaled and squeezed the trigger. His bullet traveled just ahead of the enemy's beam, striking the insurgent's skull before the shot left the barrel. The bolt missed him by inches. He didn't flinch. The jungle exploded. Dozens of enemy fighters emerged from the shadows, rifles blazing, howls cutting through the rain. From his vantage, Elias was a ghost. He moved from nest to nest, 5 positions along the ridge, each one prepared hours in advance. They never knew where the next shot came from. Each kill was surgical. A commander here. A heavy gunner there. The assault faltered within minutes, momentum broken by unseen death. In the base, Vexa stood frozen, staring at the overhead feed. The alien soldiers didn't speak. They just watched the numbers dwindle, watched infrared silhouettes drop and vanish. One by one. Unstoppable. Precise. Is he directing them? One finally asked. Mora's voice was quiet. No. He is them. On the ridge, Elias crouched beneath a half-fallen log. His cloak soaked through, his rifle muddy, but his eyes burned with focus. He switched to close-range optics. Movement. Not soldiers, command unit. He tracked 3 shapes weaving through the underbrush with more purpose than the rest. They were hunting him now. He smiled. Let them try. He looped back, circled wide, low-crawling through thorned roots and soggy earth until he was behind them. He waited for the moment when all 3 stepped into the kill zone, a low dip between rocks, and opened fire. 3 shots. 3 bodies. No sound. Something cracked nearby. He turned. Another figure, larger than the rest, armored differently. Plasma sword at its hip. Breathing mask hissing in the damp air. Not a soldier, an alpha. They locked eyes. The insurgent leader stepped forward, drawing the blade slowly, deliberately. A challenge. Not a duel of honor. A test. The alien wanted to see if the ghost was real. Elias rose, one knee in the muck, and dropped his rifle. He unholstered his sidearm, old, worn, ballistic. A relic. You're not the first to try this, he said. The alien hissed something guttural, then lunged. The fight was brief. Brutal. The plasma blade hissed past Elias's ribs, slicing through fabric, burning flesh. He didn't stop. He ducked, moved inside the arc, and fired twice into the creature's gut. When it stumbled, he stepped close and whispered, "You think you're predators because of your strength. But we learned to kill before we learned to speak." The final shot cracked the silence. The alien dropped. Elias stood over the corpse, rain washing blood from his hands. He retrieved his rifle, checked the ridge one last time, and confirmed the withdrawal. Whatever command held the enemy together was broken. The jungle fell silent again. Back at base, Mora met him at the gate. He limped through, blood trailing from his side, eyes unreadable. "They are gone?" she asked. He nodded once. "They won't regroup." She stared at him. "How did you know where they'd strike?" "Because that's where I'd strike," he said simply. Behind her, the alien soldiers parted like water. Some nodded. Others simply stared. Vexa didn't speak. He just stepped aside. As medics moved in, Elias waved them off. He sat against the wall, pulling a strip of cloth from his pack and wrapping the wound with practiced ease. "You need a hospital," Mora said. "I need silence." She crouched beside him. "What are you?" He looked at her. Not with pride. Not with ego. Just clarity. "We're the ones who hunted creatures bigger, faster, stronger than us. We're the ones who killed with sticks before we had names. You think you're predators." He touched a hand to his chest again. "But we're the apex." She didn't respond. There was nothing left to say. Above them, the rain slowed. The jungle, for the first time in weeks, was quiet. And in that stillness, every soldier there understood that war wasn't just about firepower or technology. Sometimes, it was about one man, old, outmatched, and underestimated, who remembered what the others had forgotten. How to hunt. How to endure. And how to win. The days after the battle passed like the slow turn of a clock, the tension in the base never fully dissipating. The insurgents were gone, but the unease lingered, crawling beneath the surface like a poison. The victory was too quiet. Too easy, even. Elias knew better than to believe it. The jungle didn't let go so easily. It had already shown its teeth once. It would show them again. He sat in the dark, leaning against the hull of a transport craft, cleaning his rifle. The rain had stopped, but the air was thick with the smell of damp earth and burnt ozone. The rest of the squad was resting, decompressing. No one spoke much anymore. The alien soldiers in the base moved with a caution they hadn't shown before, their previous arrogance buried under layers of doubt. Mora approached, her steps soft, the only sound in the quiet night. She was different now. There was a hardness to her that hadn't been there when they first met. It wasn't just the war, it was the realization that Elias Brandt wasn't just some old relic. He was something else. Something they couldn't easily classify. "You're sure they won't come back?" she asked, kneeling beside him. "They won't," Elias said, his voice low, but firm. "Not in force. Not the way they came before. But the commander, the one you left alive, he'll rally them. They'll regroup." Elias didn't look up as he tightened the bolt on his rifle. "They'll try. But they won't succeed." Mora studied him, as though searching for something behind the grizzled exterior. "Why?" He paused, fingers resting on the barrel of his weapon. "Because they won't understand what happened. They'll think it's just tactics, strategy. But it's more than that. It's survival. And they haven't learned to survive like we have." She didn't respond immediately. The words hung between them, heavy with a truth that had taken root in her mind. The aliens, their technology, their strength, didn't guarantee survival. It was the humans who knew how to adapt, how to endure when the world itself was trying to tear you apart. "You're not like them," she said finally. "Not like the others here. You've fought in ways we can't understand." He looked up then, meeting her gaze for the first time in a long while. "I've fought because I had to. Every war's the same, no matter the planet. It's just the players that change." Mora bit her lip, considering this. "And now? Now we wait." Her brows furrowed in confusion. Wait for what? He stood up slowly, his body creaking like old machinery, and walked to the edge of the base. He looked out into the jungle, the dark trees looming like silent sentinels. The silence had returned. For now. For the storm to pass, he said quietly. Because it always does. And then we'll see what comes next. The moon hung low in the sky, casting silver beams over the battlefield that had once been a quiet, alien world. The remnants of their victory, broken bodies, spent ammunition, the scorched earth, were now buried beneath the promise of something else. The insurgents might have been driven back, but the conflict wasn't over. It never really was. A low rumble vibrated through the ground. Elias's eyes narrowed. There was something in the air. A shift. A disturbance. He turned to Mora. "They are coming," he said. She tensed, scanning the horizon. "Who?" He didn't answer. Instead, he stepped into the shadows, disappearing into the trees with the grace of a predator. Mora stood there for a moment, uncertainty flashing across her face before she followed. The jungle came alive again. But this time, it was different. The ground trembled beneath their feet as something massive approached. It wasn't just another small band of insurgents. It was something bigger. Something more organized. Elias crouched low, moving through the underbrush without a sound, his instincts razor-sharp. He felt the vibrations in the ground, the pressure building as the unknown force drew nearer. Mora was close behind, eyes wide, her breath quickening as she adjusted her rifle. "You said they wouldn't come back," she whispered. "They didn't," he replied, voice steady. "This isn't them. This is something new." The shape broke through the tree line, dark against the faint glow of the moon. A massive war machine, alien in design, armored in thick, reflective plating. It moved like a beast, a machine that could think, could hunt. A behemoth, and behind it, more. Hundreds of them. Walking, marching in perfect formation. Mora's heart pounded in her chest. She raised her rifle, her hands trembling. "What is that?" Elias didn't move. He just watched as the machines advanced, their massive forms cutting through the jungle like a flood, crushing everything in their path. There was no hesitation. No sign of fear. Just the promise of destruction. And then, the ground shook again, this time harder, closer. Elias's eyes snapped back toward the base. More machines. Bigger ones. He turned to Mora. "Get to the command post. Now." "Where are you going?" "To finish this." She opened her mouth to protest, but the urgency in his eyes made her swallow the words. She nodded and ran. Elias didn't watch her go. Instead, he adjusted his gear and melted into the shadows. This was no longer just about fighting off insurgents. This was something bigger, and it was coming for them all. He knew that the jungle had one last lesson to teach. And this time, it would be him who would decide who the apex predator really was.